I think creator can be a broad definition. So our general thesis is that there's going to be more and more of these one person or two people companies that are going to form over time. Even there are going to be more and more freelancers creating not just content, but creating services, creating software, creating these products that are being sold to kind of everybody. Anyone who does that, I would consider as creators, which in my mind, it makes it a very, very exciting market.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Creator Business Show. My name is Chikadi Chima, and I am super excited to share our conversation today with Daniel Kang, co-founder of Flobo. Flobo helps creators get paid faster, and those are creators who have brand deals. They may be waiting 30, 60, 90 days to get a big check. So getting that check sooner frees up headspace so that they don't have to be chasing down invoices. They don't have to be thinking about how am I going to pay rent if I have medical expenses or any of the things that happen in life. They can just focus on creating. Daniel worked at SoftBank, and this is his first startup. He is really excited to talk to us today about his journey, figuring out how to ask the right questions to creators so that you're not building something based on what people say they want, but what people actually do want. It's a great conversation, and let's dive in. My guest today is Daniel Kang, CEO and co-founder of Flobo. Welcome, Daniel.
Great to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Well, we've had the chance to talk a couple times now, but one of the problems that you're solving with Flobo is creator liquidity. How do creators get paid faster? Do you want to give us a little bit of background about yourself personally, how you became the founder of Flobo, and then, why is this such an important problem to solve?
Yeah, I think this is an important problem personally. I used to be a musician myself, and I found that liquidity was often an issue. So if someone would say they'd pay me, they wouldn't pay me. I'd have to keep track of who owes me what and when and where, and things like that. I ended up taking a more traditional route professionally, working in consulting and then later on as a fintech investor at SoftBank, trying to better understand, finance in general, how does money flow? And when I left that job last year, I found that, this is a problem that's very solvable. I've seen a bunch of problems being solved this way from a commercial perspective. And I said, why can't I apply this to a lot of the artists, the musicians, and the creators that are out there? So that's kind of like how Flobo came to be.
And how big of a problem is this?
So trade finance in general is like a $3 trillion market, right? By trade finance, I mean money that's up in the air because people have not opted in to pay it as of now. Money that's owed, but that's not paid. Obviously, in the creator economy, this is a smaller than a $3 trillion market. It's a small sub-segment. But as we see more and more people become creators, we think this market is going to be growing. Even today, a lot of brands will take anywhere from a couple of days to a couple of months to pay out on the work that's been done.
Wow. And so how much of this is a technical solution versus just a, not no code per se, but how much of this is technical versus user experience?
I think it's depending on how you want to solve the problem. So the reason the problem occurs is often the brands opt not to pay early, not because of a liquidity issue, usually because of accounting and legal issues. So it takes a bit of time for the accounting team to process, it takes a bit of time to validate that the work has been done. And that's why this takes a little bit of time. The other problem that occurs is there's often a middleman. So if it's not the brands that pay the creators directly, oftentimes there are agencies or networks that are involved, which means they receive it first, go through another set of accounting processes, and then you'll see that leads to delays. So you can solve it by a couple of ways. The most traditional way of doing is factoring. So taking a bunch of invoices and then selling those invoices or getting money up front for them. That's what Flobo is able to do. But there's a lot of different technical ways to solve this. So smart contracts are a big thing, right? Web3. So if everyone agrees to be paid in a certain way, then we can just bypass all of this accounting and legal problem, and the entire problem of being delayed would disappear.
Okay. So for those who are familiar with Pipe, you've described Flobo as Pipe for creators. But for people who are not familiar with Pipe, describe what Flobo actually does.
What Flobo does is we do revenue-backed financing. What that means is we know that there's a certain amount of money that'll be coming in the future for creators, and we're able to give them an advance based on that metric. So this revenue can come in a multiple set of flavors. One flavor can be AdSense revenue from Twitch or YouTube or Patreon or any subscription-based revenue. Another flavor are brand deals where the work has already been done, but the brand is taking a couple of months to pay out, which is not very hard to validate. And then the final piece is maybe brand affiliate programs, which takes a bit of time to process the payments, but it's very easy to see how many referral links have been clicked from a metrics perspective. So all of those revenues can be taken, and then you can get an advance based on that.
That's fantastic. And so what does that actually mean to the creator then when they're getting advanced money that they're owed, but instead of waiting 45 days, 60 days, losing track, how does that actually, what kind of material impact is that making for the creator, that getting paid faster?
So I think there are kind of two large impacts. The first is liquidity and the second is headspace. So in terms of liquidity, a lot of our customers get the money so they can work on other projects, whether it's a physical product or a mobile app that they're working on. They're able to reinvest the money faster to grow their content and their audience and monetization. The other piece related to liquidity is obviously, just having money faster. And if you're a mid-sized creator, especially, liquidity matters. So this may mean making your rent, making your medical bills, and things like that.
It's pretty important stuff.
Yeah, exactly. The other major piece is like freeing up headspace. So initially when I started, I thought a lot of larger creators would not be interested in this product because I thought it was purely a liquidity issue. And if you have 10 million followers, you have more than enough money. But it turns out that a lot of creators have to keep track of who owes me what and when, and it takes a bit of headspace to do this. So if you get a manager, this might be 10, 15% of the revenue that you make. If you do it yourself, that's a lot of time that you have to invest in on a weekly basis on follow-up emails, invoicing, and things like that. So by getting paid early, you just get rid of that in its entirety.
And how easy is it for creators to use this? Because if freeing up headspace is what you're talking about, then yes, that's obviously very important. But if it's then, instead of spending 3 hours chasing down people, you're doing all this in Flobo, then that's still 3 hours. So is this like radically simpler?
Yeah, this is much, much simpler. So initially, our initial product was just uploading your contract and then linking your bank accounts. And then we'd be able to share the revenue or give you the advance based on that once you confirm. So it was as simple as upload the contract, link your bank accounts, and sign our agreement. We've recently developed a new set of product so we can cover a little bit more bases. So now creators are able to input the deals that they're working on, and we are automatically sending emails out for them if they are late, if the payment is late, and then help them auto-generate invoices. And obviously related to that, if they want to get paid earlier on invoices or from their YouTube revenue, then we're able to advance that as well. So we're going deeper into this cycle of procuring sort of the job, to the contracting, to doing the job, to keeping track of everything, to invoicing, to payouts. So we're going deeper and deeper into this cycle.
And would you handle collections if that became necessary?
Exactly. So the other piece that creators benefit from is they don't have to worry about collections. They've already gotten their money, right? So it would be Flobo who would be going after the brands and the agencies.
Hopefully that never has to happen, but just knowing that it's on a third party is definitely, like you said, freeing up headspace.
Exactly.
And so you went through Y Combinator.
Mm-hmm.
You have background with SoftBank. What's the process by which this came about? You talked about being a musician and not getting paid in a timely fashion, but walk us through how this became a startup.
Yeah, so my personal background, like I said, was I wanted to pursue music full time. I unfortunately come from, let's say, like a humble background in terms of finances, which is why I ended up taking a more traditional career. But even during college and throughout my career, I was very focused on providing better and fairer access to capital to people who need it, primarily to fund their life, but also pursue things outside of the traditional sort of engineering, law, and dentistry or whatever, the things that are considered more traditional. So did a lot of work on microfinancing, crowdfunding, saw that community was a large part. And in fact, the single greatest indicator of raising capital. And I felt the creators had that. And as I had this insight, I ended up continue working with fintech companies at SoftBank, both in the California and the London office, looking at trade finance and asset-backed financing companies. So all of that means is, how do we move money around based on what asset you have? Like, what do you own? And it turns out that creators own a lot of content, they own revenue streams, they own their audience. So based on that, I said, why can't we do this? So after my second year at SoftBank, I left to do a master's degree. And while I was there, COVID had hit. And when COVID had hit, it wasn't just what we considered like creators, but any sort of freelancers without salaries didn't have a lot of these protections from both employers and governments because of this issue. And I said, well, they've got a ton of assets, but traditional banks aren't able to extend them credit. Traditional financial institutions aren't able to give them capital. So I said, I think I could probably underwrite risk better by looking at separate metrics. And that's when I met my co-founder, Norman, who spent 3 years across hedge funds assessing risk of financial assets. And I said, why don't we kind of try to build a company like this together? So we incorporated in March of this year and then started to raise capital, and was lucky enough to go through YC this summer. And that's kind of how we made that decision.
That's amazing. And so it's so fast, in the development stage, but in the germination, in the ideation stage. Sounds like it was something that has been with you for a long time.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
So one of the things that I was thinking about, just as you mentioned it, is maybe not for the mid-level creator, but for the kind of higher tier of creator, they're still getting paid on a 1099. And as a freelancer, is there anything that you're thinking about in terms of helping them to be able to maybe purchase a house or have better financial records for larger financing needs?
Yeah, I think helping them build credit or alternative forms of credit is something that we're toying with. This can be with a couple of things. We could help them improve their credit score from a very traditional basis. We could, again, look at their revenues of like what's coming in, or we could look at what they already own, including their financial assets, and provide them capital based on that. So that is an idea that we're toying with right now, but we'll see what happens in the next couple of months.
And then what got your investors excited about being part of your journey?
I think there's a couple things that we're doing that's exciting. I think most, as you know, the VC game is not about how do we invest in like $100 million company. It's more about how do we invest in the next, $10 billion, $100 billion company. And that's why the logic makes sense. Where we see ourselves in the long term is a couple ways. One way is just disrupting the entire procure to pay cycle. So procurement being, how do creators and freelancers find brand deals? How do they think about contracting? How do they think about creating and doing the work, invoicing and tracking, and then the payout, the entire cycle. So obviously we're starting with the payment side and the invoicing side, and then moving down cycle. You'll see a lot of public comps that are doing this in the commercial space, and they're obviously very, very profitable in that sense. The other angle that we have is we want to be the center point of all creator assets being traded. So when we look at when we say we advance people based on their revenue, we can structure different financial products. So right now we have income share agreement, which is one of our first products, but we can have invoice factoring, and then obviously some more esoteric assets like NFTs and so on and so forth. So every time we take an asset and we turn that into a financial product, we want this to go through Flobo, almost like the New York Stock Exchange. So anything creator related, any asset that's traded will be done through us. So I think that's kind of what made investors excited about Flobo.
So then you could securitize and make derivatives based on anticipated creator revenue?
Well, that's exactly it.
That's really sophisticated. So what does that world look like? You talked about the what, but then, in a more full featured way, what does it look like if someone is newsletter publisher, or, say Marcus Brownlee, who does his product reviews on YouTube, and all of a sudden now he is in the Flobo marketplace, and someone says, I want to own a piece of his revenue and I want to, securitize it. So what does that look like?
So that's a great question. It depends on what we want the base.
He or she, let's say he or she.
Or they, right?
Yeah. I want to own a piece of their revenue.
I think it depends what the base unit of asset is going to look like. So obviously the easiest way is on a contract by contract basis, but we don't think this is what makes it exciting. So for example, let's say you make subscription revenue and we decide to bring that forward, give you an advance, and then we sell this off to the financial markets as, we securitize it and sell it off to other investors. That's interesting on a contract basis, but it doesn't give you exposure into this exponential growth potential that you have as a creator. What would give you that is more of like an equity-like structure or a derivative-like structure. So can you succeed when this creator succeeds? So can we do a longer-term royalty or revenue share agreement such that if you do grow exponentially, you're able to benefit from this? This also makes sense from a content perspective. Like, are you willing to license some of your content in the case that you do become big? The investors would be able to get the upside. And then the other sort of asset related to that is obviously sort of this Web3 based NFT assets, such that it's really based on scarcity, potentially utility when you build communities. And every time there's a transaction, the creator continues to benefit and the investors continue to benefit, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So I think the more interesting thing is, can we do it with the simple stuff first? Can we do it with the revenue and cash backed assets first? And then after that, can we go into more of like a equity-like or NFT-like asset and then bring that onto the market?
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So I don't know if you saw this, but last week, Sam Lessin made a $1.7 million investment into creator Marina Mogilko, Lingua Maria, and she has a language learning YouTube channel. And Sam was a VP at Facebook, and his company was acquired by Facebook. And I think he might have been Harvard classmates with Mark Zuckerberg at one point.
Nice.
But they're doing an income share agreement where she's taking $1.7 million up front for 5% of her creator revenue for, I think, for the next 35 years, including licensing and what have you.
I think the hardest part is just enforcement of this stuff. I think we already see this with athletes. We see this with record labels and things. There's a lot of legal battles that happen. I'm curious if that would happen with creators as well.
It's a really interesting thing because there's a certain, when I think about it, and actually she's agreed to be on the show. So
nice.
Hopefully people will see this episode before they see that episode. But the idea of what is creator revenue, and then on the one hand, and then on the other hand, if she's the first person to get this kind of investment, then there's a certain inevitability, I would imagine, because she's now saying like, hey, not only am I creator and I'm good at this, but there's extra interest because of the fact that she's the first person to get a direct investment as a creator.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting incentive problems that occur as well, right? For example, if you sell off more than 20% or 30% or 40% of your creator revenue, does that mean you are disincentivized to continue generating revenue as a creator? Maybe so should there be a limit to how much you can sell off into the future, right? The other piece is like what constitutes creator revenue. So suppose you start a business, like does that get counted? I'm just curious how the legal contracting would work. That's some of the things that we're looking into as well. How do we think about these incentive alignment? How do we think about some of the restrictions and enforcement and things?
So you have a product out there in the market. How many creators are you getting to work with at this point through Flobo?
So right now we're still in a closed beta. We are basically testing with a dozen or a couple dozen creators and saying, look, try using our product, use our product to kind of track deals. And we're examining like how they're using the product and the stickiness of like each product. So for example, we found the invoice factoring or early payments invoice to be really, really repetitive. So once a user starts using it, they're coming back, every week or every other week, every time they have a brand deal to get paid early. We're also looking at how often are they using this invoice feature, what's sticky, what's not sticky, how can we make it better? So we're still in learn from the user stage in a very intimate manner before we open it to the public.
Sure. And then, so you're testing it out in a very close feedback loop.
That's right.
What problems are you looking to solve on the creator's behalf that are the next features that are going to roll out from Flobo?
So there's a lot of different ideas and features that are being voiced. So one of them is just a very simple way to track or helping them make better decisions. And in order to do that, they need to track things. And there's a fine balance between too much detail and too little detail. So for example, let's say I'm a creator and I'm making money from affiliate deals, brand deals, my YouTube, and my Patreons. I know roughly how much time I'd be spending on each of those things, but I'm not sure how much money I'm generating from each of those things. So suppose I spend, only 10% of my time on my brand deals, but 90% of my revenue comes from brand deals. Then I should allocate more time to brand deals rather than, say, spending 50% of my time on brand affiliate programs. So it's helping them make better decisions by providing them enough data, but not too much data that they're overwhelmed. So we're testing this feature out as well. But honestly, we're continuing to just work with creators and seeing what other problems we can solve for them.
That's great. And what discovery from this feedback loop you have with creators has been most revealing and most exciting to you thus far?
I think just living and breathing with creators has been fun. So I did something called Launch House Beta out of Los Angeles, where they bring a lot of creator economy founders and creators together, and we literally live together and build together and launch together for a month. So I did that, and the feedback loop was literally in hours, right? So when we talk about product iteration, I got off a call with a creator or spoke with a creator over breakfast at 9, and then built a product roadmap by 2, and then we had an MVP by 11. The next day, we showed them the product and the feature. Like, do you like it? Is this what you were looking for? So the feedback loop has been incredibly good. The other piece is just spending time with creators and understanding them, and understanding that, like, I use the term creator very loosely, but I mean, if you're a beauty creator, you're extremely different from a music creator who's very, very different from a gamer. So just being able to spend a time with a wide variety of creators has been helpful.
Who is a creator in your mind that is not the typical profile? You mentioned beauty, gaming, music. So outside of the traditional idea of a creator, who do you think falls into the creator economy today?
As I see it,
Yeah.
I think creator can be a broad definition. So our general thesis is that there's going to be more and more of these one person or two people companies that are going to form over time. So even there are going to be more and more freelancers creating not just content, but creating services, creating software, creating these products that are being sold to kind of everybody. So that's anyone who does that I would consider as creators, which in my mind, it makes it a very, very exciting market.
Yeah. So you're saying that anybody who sends out an invoice could potentially be a Flobo user.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe we can just get rid of that problem, completely. No more delays.
Wow. We have mentioned the word NFT has come up. So are there any Web3 implications of what you're doing that you guys are thinking about integrating into your product roadmap?
Yeah, there's a couple things that we are thinking about and studying about a little bit more. So I mentioned this $3 trillion problem of trade finance or delayed payments can be potentially fixed with Web3. And one way to do this is just get rid of the entire accounting and legal process that creates the delay in the first place. So as soon as this if-then statement is fulfilled, so smart contract, as you know, is on the blockchain. There are a set of if-then statements. When certain things are fulfilled, then certain results happen. In this case, if a certain metric was hit or if a certain post was made, then the payment goes directly to the creator. And the payments can be split across the agents and the networks and the creator or whoever else is kind of involved without this complicated or manual accounting processes and legal processes that are involved. So I think incorporating smart contracts and trying to disrupt that space is one area that we're thinking about. The other way that we're looking at Web3 is expanding the scope of assets. So not everything has to be cash backed or revenue backed. In fact, the most intangible sort of asset that creators have is probably their community. And people try to monetize this in different ways, right? Like, how engaged is your audience? What's the conversion rate of your audience? What's the demographic of your audience? Those things matter, but I think allowing creators to get financial benefit out of that asset through NFTs or even DAOs could be a potentially interesting path going forward. But we will see how all of that can be integrated.
Yeah, you're not a blockchain first business, so you have a lot more time to figure out exactly what could work.
Exactly.
But that makes really, I mean, if I'm understanding right, the idea of creating a token around the potential revenue of a creator and then being able to let that token float based on how much interest there is in the creator and what revenue they're bringing in, actually, it then has intrinsic value, right?
Exactly. But it doesn't even have to be tied to revenue or cash per se. It could be related to the benefits it unlocks as being a part of the community.
Oh, yeah.
So suppose that, you know, if you hold a certain amount of tokens, you will have access to certain benefits to the creator or to community events. So I think this being able to truly monetize this community would be a very interesting value prop for creators.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up actually, because recently was NFT NYC, or at least recent to the recording of this episode, and the Bored Ape Yacht Club, which is a token based. Are they a DAO?
I'm actually not too familiar.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, what I understand of Bored Ape Yacht Club is that they created 10,000 or so of these profile picture sized NFTs, and then people have bid the prices up to insane amounts. But part of the attraction is the art, and then unlocking certain privileges, like you said. So there's events that you can access, and you can attend an event only if you own one of these NFTs.
Mm-hmm.
So the same would be very interesting for a Flobo creator or their community in this analogy, where maybe the value of the token isn't about how much cash they're bringing in, but how engaged their community is.
Exactly.
So if they only released a few of these tokens, then only 50 or 100 or 500 people in the world have access to certain privileges, whether it's webinars or in-person book signings, what have you. So in the abstract, it sounds like that's kind of what you're thinking about.
Exactly. It is still not concrete yet, but I'm seeing how everything develops a little bit more, and quite honestly, just studying the technology behind all of this.
So what, if any, adjacent industries or trends are you following in addition to talking to the creators on a daily basis?
Yeah, so it relates to how I thought about or define, creators. So the freelancer market in the US alone is, a $1.2 trillion market. A lot of these freelancers are actually not full-time, they're part-time, right? So I think more and more people would be doing freelancing work on a part-time basis. So how could we create an interesting product for them? And this goes back to this procure to pay cycle that I talked about, right? Like, how are they finding work? How are they contracting? How are they invoicing? How are they paying out? So that's an adjacent market that I'm looking at. So one obvious thing is, LinkedIn bio for creators is pretty prolific, right? There's a lot of players out there, from Linktree to Beacons to, I think almost everyone is, creating this linked.
Pico.
Exactly.
Pico just launched one in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, no way. I actually have one of their water bottles.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, so I think a similar sort of thing can happen for the freelance economy as well, or for these creators, to showcase their profile, their work, and things. I'm sure there's a lot of companies that are already doing this, but it's an area that I'm tracking at the moment.
So the whole freelance economy. That's a really exciting place to be at. A company I worked with recently, last year or so, called Rapbook. They help with payroll for film and entertainment, which is a $161 billion payroll market by itself. But then the same technology applied across the freelance business landscape is a massive addressable market.
Mm-hmm.
And, they just last week announced $100 million financing led by Tiger Global.
Very nice.
And Andreessen invested $25 million 6 months prior. So they're really on a tear. So yeah, I mean, that just to me says that the freelance market that you're looking at beyond, creators are freelancers full time, but then people who make their living servicing businesses and other creative freelance pursuits have the same problems. So that's pretty cool.
Exactly. The other piece to do this, I think the government also cares about this sort of thing, right? So from a policy perspective, there's been the PRO Act and things like that to empower freelancers in a better way, or to help them out. Obviously, the outcome of PRO Act was debatable, but there is a lot of like government support and backing to be protecting these creators and freelancers as well.
So then what does we talked about the mind space and the just getting paid faster. So then what does the Flobo creator's day look like in the ideal scenario?
In an ideal scenario, it related to Mindspace, they get like hundreds, some of these creators get hundreds of emails, some of which are scams, some of which are not, saying, hey, we want a bit of your time, we want a bit of your help kind of promoting our product or promoting our services. Just sifting through that is pretty hard. So in an ideal world, Flobo would kind of sift that through for them, and then it would auto input all of the deals that would be interesting. The creator would then go get the deal done, and then we would automatically kind of pay them out, invoice the brands, and then it would just be a very seamless process. So the creator can just focus only on the creative process, and continuing to build their audience and grow and things like that. And recognize that creators' main job isn't just doing brand deals, right? It's just creating good content, and a lot of creators got into this to make good content and then enjoy themselves a little bit more. What this enables them to do, however, is just be a little bit more broader in their creative landscape. So a lot of creators are pigeonholed into one set of content if they solely rely on monetization. So if you do a certain set of videos, let's say like pranks, or if you do like storytelling, or you do a very niche sort of thing, it's very hard to switch over to other things, and actually takes a lot of risk for you to do that.
I personally don't like the pranks. They're so, it's like the girlfriend, boyfriend pranks, especially. It's like, I wouldn't want to be in that relationship, because you're constantly getting eggs dropped on you or, yeah, the pranks is an interesting one because they go super viral, but then how real are they is my question.
No, that exactly. But yeah, it allows them to have a little bit more creative freedom to do what they want. And then allows them to kind of build things on top of their just building content, right? So even taking examples of Twitch and YouTube. So Twitch is if you think about a job, it's like almost like an hourly paid job most of the time, right? It's mostly how many hours you stream, although there's some subscriptions related to that, compared to YouTube, which is like a catalog social platform. So as you continue to post, the value and the asset kind of continues to increase, rather than Twitch, which is more of like an hourly based sort of thing. So can you go beyond the social media platforms? So when you invest time and energy, you continue to grow and build your asset on top of all of this.
That was a really interesting point you made about pranks versus music versus beauty versus, lots of different content types where your audience may not go with you if you want to branch out. Storytelling was another one you said.
Mm-hmm.
So then are you also thinking about building a marketplace of brands that creators can then pitch themselves to, or you can do matchmaking where the creator has an audience and they want to expand and there's a brand that wants to reach new members and new viewers?
That is an area that's in the back burner. We'll see how important this is. If we were to create sort of a feature or product like that, it would be related to, it would have to be very creator friendly, right? So that's kind of how we would think about it. But what we think is, as long as we can continue to bring in creators and create a community of creators on Flobo, there would be more than enough ways to add value to creators and create win-win situation, whether it's with brands, whether it's other creator economy companies, or so on and so forth.
I've been wanting to ask you this for a while, but where did the name Flobo come from?
So I'll be really honest with you. I wish I had a really good story of, some precise epiphany that came with the idea, but I just I had an investor call and I hadn't focused on the name. I had focused on the business model. I had focused on how to run the product, how to build the product. But I had an investor call the next day and I'm like, oh, I need a name. So I said, well, it's some sort of flow. It's a flow of capital of some sort, but I don't want it to sound too corporate, and I want it to be 2 syllables. So Flobo sounds okay. And then I said, I can change the name whenever, but it just ended up sticking.
Nice. Well, yeah, it's, once you have a name, it becomes that much more real. So it sounds as though that problem was solved fairly quickly. So that's great. Okay, so no marketplace necessarily could be a value add, but it's more about just the here and the now.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of partners are you working with to bring this to market?
Yeah, so we're working with a lot of agencies and networks who already manage, hundreds, if not thousands, of creators. So the reason we're able to work with them was they were very familiar with this problem, right? So every other day they would get a call from a creator saying, "Hey, like, when's my money coming in?" Right? Or, "Hey, like, can I just get a little? I know money from YouTube is coming in. Can I get money a little bit earlier?" And while some of these agencies and networks can cater to their top creators, it would be very challenging for them to do this to all of their creators, right? They're not a bank; they don't have a huge balance sheet, or even if they did, the money could be spent doing what they're very good at, right? Which is building audience and like bringing brands and things like that. So when we approach them, a lot of them were very open to working with Flobo because it's a service, it's a problem they know creators have, and it's a service they'd be able to provide to their talent.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get Kareen from Slope onto the show as
Oh, that
well.
would be nice.
Because the TikTok creators, we haven't really talked about TikTok creators that much, but there's direct monetization inside TikTok, and then there's the brand deals. So, we've mostly talked about Twitch and YouTube. Where do TikTok creators fit into all of this?
TikTok is an interesting platform to say the least because sometimes there's a large mismatch between your followers and your views. And the reason for this is the feed on TikTok isn't determined by who you follow per se. I think it's mostly determined on a discovery, right? So what did you spend time on, and TikTok is just going to feed you what they think you are most interested in, and that doesn't necessarily correlate with the creators that you follow, right? So you'll see that even for creators, when they post, the views they get will often not be from their followers. It just might be from a larger audience. So there's like a little bit of mismatch there. Yeah, TikTok, I think there's a lot of different monetizations that are happening. I think they had a partnership with Shopify that happened recently. So we'll see where all of this goes and how this plays out. But yeah, I mean, TikTok creators are right now, we're helping them with some of their brand deals, but beyond that, we're holding off for now.
Yeah, on the subject of TikTok, it's just so addictive that I've had to steer clear of it for a while. But then I went on for some reason. I found this guy, and I want to say he's an undergraduate in ancient languages, but he can speak Proto-Indo-European and Latin and Greek and Hittite, Egyptian, like ancient Egyptian. Yeah, and it's just fascinating. I mean, I just you have to stay away from TikTok sometimes because it's just like it's so rich and so deep. But yeah, monetization for him, he's just either an undergraduate or in grad school, but very young, so he doesn't have the same needs of feeding a family and maintaining a staff.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely has an audience. So this is the creator liquidity issue touches on many things.
Oh yeah, and what you find with a lot of TikTok creators, not all of them, they'll try to bring them onto different platforms. So a lot of creators, recognize that a lot of the money or stable income is earned through YouTube. So a lot of TikTok creators will try to divert their audience onto YouTube or even Instagram. And then the real estate for LinkedIn bios is obviously very, very important in order to do that and for the fans to continue to stay engaged, right? So I think that's a lot of creators start on TikTok because they can grow a lot faster than on other platforms, and then try to move that over to sort of the YouTubes of the world.
And I mean, does the audience go with them?
I think that's kind of the hard piece that a lot of TikTokers have to deal with. So can I bring the audience over? One other benefit of like having short form content is that it can be recycled across multiple platforms. So YouTube Shorts and even Facebook. So I think that's like one way to try to build an audience on other platforms. So you already created the video, it can obviously go to YouTube Shorts and then get the YouTube audience there. But conversion, I hear, is not, at least with the creators that we've spoken with, is not too great. And obviously this is new, and people will get better and better at this.
And so, how big is your team right now?
My team is extremely small. We like to keep it slow. It's just myself and my co-founder, Norman. And we intend to stay this way until we hit, what we think is product market fit.
And then how are you going to look to grow the team once product market fit is achieved?
I think we want to see which feature and which product hits the most. The obvious gap in our team right now is just having a creator on board with us. So a creator who can be a part of the team, who can do outreach individually to creators, to empathize a little bit more. So that would probably be the next hire. The other gap that we have on our team is probably related to design. So my forte is not in design, neither is Norman's. So that would be kind of what we would think about there.
Nice. Anything else you want to share about the journey or what you've learned?
No, I think that's everything. One thing I do want to share is, and I think this might be an unpopular opinion, but there's this perception that entrepreneurs are extremely risk seeking. The way that I've approached entrepreneurship is kind of the exact opposite. So I've wanted to start my own thing for a very long time. I told you briefly about my background. So I wanted to create a bit of a safety net for my family before, embarking on what I would consider a pretty risky journey. But there's many things that I did to hedge this risk, right? So one is like working in traditional jobs and building networks of investors, working at SoftBank and things like that, while building my safety net for my family. Then like during grad school, where there's a lot of opportunities for students, I kind of thought about the company, started building the company, and started my raise while I was still in school, right? So worst case scenario, I get a job after grad school like everybody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
My worst case scenario was getting a degree from Oxford, right? And then after that point, we had gotten into Y Combinator, right? So how can I improve the statistical chance of me succeeding as a company, whether it's due to the community, whether it's due to kind of the tools, or whether it's due to the fact that the entrepreneurs who happen to be very successful go through things like YC. So I've thought about all along the ways of how do I create a minimal loss or like a no loss scenario, and while continuing to kind of build kind of the company. Like that doesn't mean that I expect this company to fail, but that does mean that I recognize the probability of success in my first company. I recognize that I understand the math, right? So I think trying to de-risk as you build your company is actually not a bad thing, rather than just jumping into it as if it's like a noble thing to do.
Yeah, I really respect you for saying that, because there is a certain devil may care attitude that's associated with starting a startup, but that doesn't mean that that's everybody's attitude. So, having de-risked your journey as much as possible, what was the term you just used? Creating a no lose,
Yeah, a no loss scenario, right?
no loss scenario. There's a certain, I mean, startup founders are entrepreneurs, creators are entrepreneurs, but they're not the same type of entrepreneur. So, what have you learned in this journey in the creator economy about mistakes that traditional startups make when serving this audience?
So I think the hardest thing that a lot of creator economy companies have had, and I've heard this multiple times, and I face this myself, is just being able to speak with creators, right? So creators are inherently bombarded with messages, right? They've got millions of followers. Everyone wants a piece of their attention. And even if you have the best product in the world, if you have no way of connecting with creators, it's very, very hard to get feedback and get their time to speak with you. So I think building relationship with creators kind of comes first. The other mistake that I see is this, and this isn't just creator economy startups per se, it's all startups, is at least people like me, we're pretty good at hypothesizing, and from an intellectual perspective say, oh, like here are all of the incentive structures, and this is kind of the future that I imagine for this sort of product and this sort of problem. The problem with that is you have to actually go speak with users to validate that, right? And not speaking enough and not spending enough time with users and not asking the right questions, I think, is the biggest mistake that I see. So I'll give you an example, right? So there's a really good book called The Mom Test, where it teaches people about how to ask good questions. So let's say I have a coffee product that I want to sell. If I go up to my friend and say, hey, like I'm building a coffee product, like would you pay $10 for it? That would be a pretty bad question to be asking. The question you should be asking is more along the lines of, hey, like, do you drink coffee on a daily or a weekly basis? Like, how much money do you spend on coffee on a daily or weekly basis? If you don't drink coffee, like, and drink tea, like, what made you switch? Is it because of an acid problem? Is it because there's too much caffeine content? Was it too expensive? Or it turns out that you drink coffee every day, but that coffee is, you only drink it because it's free in your office, right? So these are the sorts of like things you should be thinking about when speaking with users, and these are the same mistakes that I made in the very beginning. And I see this mistake being repeated, multiple times for at least first-time founders.
Yeah, I imagine when you say that, I imagine the startup pitching its product or trying to do user feedback to creators similar to people serving restaurants, where it's like, I am bombarded by both customer service requests, and then there's 1,000 startups in San Francisco that want to be my point of sale service. So
Exactly.
what kind of gap does that create where creators are not able to talk to the startups that are hoping to make change for them?
So, I mean, it's unfortunate for both parties, right? It's like a all loss scenario where some founders may be creating tools that might actually help creators, but creators are unable to see this, or it gets blended into noise that they're unable to see or trust it or see it properly, right? And then on the founder's perspective, if they don't get proper feedback, they might spend a bunch of time building a product only to find out that either creators are unwilling to pay for it or literally unable to pay for it in many cases, right? So if you're going after smaller creators and charging them, maybe they're actually unable to pay for a product like that, even if it's valuable. So I think this communication, bridging that will be really important, which is a part of what Flobo is trying to do, right? If we can curate a community of creators, continuing to be a part of this, then we can learn a little bit more about how they interact with the product, what sort of needs that they may have, and then make the right introductions to the right sort of tools for them.
And it sounds like you've really mitigated risk in as many ways as possible. On the topic of customer feedback, what's an example of a really bad decision that you made, or a wrong turn that you made up to now?
Asking right questions is probably the biggest mistake that I made. So in the beginning, I was very excited about my product, right? This revenue-backed financing thing. And I said, hey guys, like, would you be interested if you could get money up front? And guess what? It turns out money already has product market fit, right? So what I mean by that is when you go up to a stranger and say, do you want money? Like, yeah, they want money. What I fail to understand more is like, okay, how much time are you willing to spend on it? Or how much money are you willing to give up to get your money, like, access your money up front? And, basic questions like this. And obviously, like, the reason I mentioned this mistake is I think it's a common one. I've been a part of this, and then I ended up building something that wasn't as popular as I thought it would be. And now we're, moving towards some other areas.
Okay, so you're just asking questions where you're going to get a definite yes, and asking tougher questions to get at the root of what the pain is. Is that fair to say?
Exactly. So I don't think customer calls in the beginning should be sales pitches. It should be like discovery calls, like literally floating the idea or understanding their process a little bit better, rather than getting feedback on an idea. I think those are two different in terms of the purpose of the call.
So you said the mom test was a good place to go.
Yeah, I found that book very helpful. It was recommended by my co-founder, who has been part of different startups in the past, and I learned a ton from that book.
Yeah, I had an experience not so long ago where I was introduced to somebody, and they just started blasting me with customer discovery questions, and I'm not their customer. I was only taking the intro because I was doing that on a friend's behalf. So I actually had to tell my friend, like, look, this person, I'm introed because of you, but there's no value from me, and they're asking a lot of my time.
Yeah, exactly.
So then what did you say to the creators? Because they could be creating, they could be, chasing down invoices, or for me, and at this stage of my life, doing nothing and just having the time to process everything that's going on is a really important activity of doing nothing. So what was I guess you were in the creator house, right? So that must have helped. But what was your pitch to them of like, hey, give me half an hour of your time so that I can work on my startup?
Yeah, so I think the way I thought about pitching, so in the beginning, the same thing happened, right? So I asked my friends who were creators, and then I asked for intros, and the way they thought about the call was, I'm doing this person a favor, which is not a horrible thing, right? Like, you're a startup, you're getting started, which is not bad. What we found to be the most compelling calls were at the end of the call, the creator asks, So when can I use the product?
Nice.
Or when will it be available? Right. So these are really good signs. And those are the types of creators who are willing to spend the time, because once they spend the time and then they get a catered product that addresses their real need. Right. So for them, it's worth their time. And those are probably the best initial customers to get started with. And if it takes like forever to speak with the creator and it's clear that they're not that interested, probably not the right call.
Have any of the creators that said, when is this going to be ready, become users?
So like some of the newest feature sets that we're building is for the creators who said, look, I'm willing to pay you $100 a month for this. Like, can you, like, I'd love this. Can you like build it now? So that's kind of like that's how we think about getting conviction in spending time building a feature and testing this out. And obviously the threshold is still pretty low, right? That's like 1 or 2 customers or potential customers, but we are early in our journey. And then hopefully as we build more and more users, it'll become easier and easier to see what creators want.
Yeah. And so right now you're taking 3 or 4% of a factored invoice.
Yeah, that's kind of like what we're doing. And then the remaining is kind of free service, right? So being able to track your brand deals, do automated follow-ups, do generate invoices, all of those would be free.
And then have you explored any vertical finance applications to this?
Yeah, we're trying to look. There's a bunch of products that have already been, thrown out there, right? So like Stir is one, Creative Juice is another, Carrot is like another. I think it's good to learn from those first movers and see what creators are actually excited by, right? So if people are excited by analytics of their financial spending, like why aren't a lot of creators using Mint? Or like, are they using like an alternative like Mint, but I'm just not aware, right? So if they're not using it, like, why are they not using it? Is it an awareness problem? Is it like the fact that it takes too much time to label stuff? Like what is going on? Or maybe it's just not useful to them at all, right? So I'm trying to understand, again, stay close to users and figure out, look, what do they want? And only build if I have some level of conviction that it is truly something people want.
Nice. Well, that I guess is helped by the fact that it's just the two of you and early raise, so you don't have investors breathing down your neck to get to an IPO just yet.
Not yet.
So who's the ideal Flobo user right now, and how can they get a hold of you?
So the ideal Flobo users is it's just a creator who is consistently doing brand deals or want to do something beyond just being on social platforms. So if you have a lot of brand deals that are coming in, one of our users had literally like $100,000 up in the air, right? Because brands weren't paying him. Some of them were net 30, some of them were like net 90. So he was just waiting on payments. So to get access to that money early, it was actually pretty important. And just keeping a track of like what's coming in and who's paying you at what time, are things late? So, people who need help with a headspace. The other sort of creators that we're looking for are creators who are going beyond platforms. So launching their own stores, launching their own games, who need a bit of extra, capital injection, would be kind of the creators we'd love to help.
Fantastic. Anything else before we go?
No, I think this is great. I had fun.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for you and your time. And I hope that those creators that are looking to expand are going to find this and, reach out.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thank you for your time. And we'll definitely stay in touch.